This last Passover of 2024, Jews around the world had to contend with how can we celebrate our holiday of freedom when we have 140 hostages sitting in tunnels, dungeons, without food, water, air, sunlight, probably being tortured? And how can we sit at our own tables when families are sitting with an empty chair, knowing that their loved one is spending a Passover under such horrific conditions? To quote my brother Amram, he says that the Torah and the Haggadah, for that matter, is not just a book of laws and Jewish history, but a book of destiny. How so? Especially if there is nothing overly prophetic in the Torah. How then can we refer to it for future events? The answer is that the Torah is the DNA of creation, the DNA of reality, and therefore what once was will be again. In the spirit of what the Sefer Yetzirah says, Na'utz sofo be'atchalato. The end of history is pegged in its very beginning. Or as the sages say more familiarly, Ma'aseh avot siman labanim. The lives of the forefathers is a sign for their children. The official text of the Haggadah was put together by the sages to ensure that we cover the story of Exodus from Egypt and the accompanying miracles. But the Haggadah does not go into the Exodus story in any detail. Instead, it speaks of a brief history of our forefathers, with an emphasis of our forefather Jacob and his plight in fleeing from his brother's fury for impersonating him, and taking the blessings that was meant for his brother and robbing his brother of a special moment and bond with his favorite person in the world, their shared father. The Haggadah of Passover has an odd expression that is only found one time in the Haggadah. Tse ulmad. Go out and learn. Don't just stay in a box. Go out and apply yourself to see how what is written here in the Haggadah applies in other places and other times. The Haggadah suggests that what Pharaoh did to the Hebrews was not as bad as what Laban, Jacob's father-in-law and uncle, tried to do to Jacob. Jacob served his father-in-law for over 20 years. His descendants, in parallel, served Pharaoh for over 200 years, 10 times the amount of years. Jacob's life is the micro-template for the nation of Israel. Tse ulmad. Go out and learn. What happened to Jacob and why? Jacob was born with a twin who was twice the man he was. The Torah says that Esau was a man of hunting, a man of the field. Jacob was a simple man who stayed indoors. Esau was a doer, one who would experience the world, conquer fearsome foes, excel at hunting. Esau's life was exciting. Jacob's life was boring. Jacob's sin? He wanted to be like his older brother. When young, he took advantage of his brother's hunger to take his birthright, and as he got older, he impersonated him and stole his blessings. The consequence? 20 years in exile, raising a family and making a living away from home. When brothers don't get along, for Jacob, it resulted in 20 years of exile. When brothers don't get along, for Joseph and his brothers, it resulted in 200 years of exile. And for the nation of Israel, when brothers don't get along, it resulted in 2,000 years of exile. Eventually, Jacob meets with his wives. He expresses how his father-in-law has changed his attitude toward him. His wives agree, and they decide it's time to move back to his ancestral homeland, and so they pack up and they leave. Jacob took the wealth that he had accumulated in his 20 years of exile and paid tribute to his brother in droves. His descendants, throughout 2,000 years of exile, had overpaid crushing taxes, tributes, and had wealth confiscated by Esau's descendants who were kings of Europe, wealthy landowners, corrupt governments, jealous neighbors, Cossacks, sinister clergymen, and the list goes on. Under Rome, France, Christian Spain, Nazi Germany, Tsarist Russia, and the list goes on. Just prior to his return to the land of Israel, Jacob encounters a divine being. There are no words with this being. He seems to have it in for Jacob. So there are no words, just struggle. and Jacob survives the assault, but he emerges limping. The Jews of exile, of the diaspora, also decide it's time to return to their ancestral homeland. But prior to their return, they encounter what Rabbi Avigdor Miller refers to as divine madness. The Jews survive their genocidal assault, their Holocaust, but they also leave limping, with 1/3 of their population wiped out. It is that encounter which earned Jacob the name Israel, and in the parallel of Jewish history, it is the aftermath of the Holocaust which restored the name of Israel upon the Jewish people and the land of Israel to its exiled children. The next morning, Jacob meets his brother and he bows down to him 7 times. In the national parallel, the nation of Israel spent the next 7 decades capitulating to their Edomite allies, USA, Europe, Russia. They respond with unparalleled restraint to Arab aggression. They endure bombardments of UN resolutions and lose countless of lives. According to the Bible, Jacob and Esau eventually part ways. The modern nations of Edom will also eventually part ways, even the democratic ones, because democracy has no failsafe for when they experience a zombie apocalypse of Jew hatred to sweep their continents. Esau eventually forms an alliance with Ishmael by marrying his daughter. Whether it be imported or homegrown, it is inevitable. Israel historically capitulated to the US in support of their industrial military complex. And now, after 7 decades of capitulating to them, they are now left at their mercy. We are in that decade of breakdown in the relationship between Jacob and Esau. Now we will freeze the frame on the Jacob and Esau reunion and look back retrospectively at Jacob. What was his sin? His sin was that he loved his brother and wanted to be just like him. How do we know this? Because the lives of our forefathers are repeated with their children. What is the sin of the Jewish people? We love people. We love other nations, and we want to be just like them. Our mistake is that we think others are like us, and they are not. That is one of the 2 mistakes that Zionism made. It was an attempt to be a nation like all other nations, a people like all other people. But we are not. Israel is not a nation like other nations. The other mistake that Zionism made was that they removed God from their mandate and actively sought to erase him from the Jewish consciousness. A great mistake. For God and morality was the Jewish people's gift to humanity, and it cannot be extricated from our being. We are the Son of God. We are the firstborn Son of God, tasked with transmitting the values of heaven to earth. The evil prophet Balaam was once hired to curse the Jewish people in the desert. And when he saw them and prepared his mouth to curse them, he can only bless. And he said, Hen am levadad yishkon. Behold, they are a nation that dwells alone. For better or for worse, we are singled out among the nations. When Esau offered Jacob to escort him, to Esau's offer, the Zohar articulates Jacob's decline. Thank you, but I want neither the bee's honey or his sting. We still have ways to go. The children are young. They take small steps. We will catch up to you one day. So Jacob appeases his brother. They embrace, they kiss. Jacob undoes his sin. He took a blessing that did not belong to him, and he gave that blessing back to his twin. He was told that his brother would bow to him. He instead bowed to his brother. He has come to terms with who he is and who he is meant to be. He is Israel. He is the only one who is exclusively close enough to God to struggle with him and emerge victorious. We are Israel. We are living in prophetic times these days. Even if Israel would be abandoned by other nations, there is a silver lining. There is still one that we will be able to rely on. When that time comes, there will be a showdown between all peoples. The Christians will be certain in their beliefs, the Muslims will be certain in their beliefs, and they will be confident in their numbers. When that time comes, God will only be able to show off his might through the smallest nation, his treasured nation, Israel.